And so welcome everyone to Typecal from home. Yeah, we're based in Kuwait, but thanks to Zoom, we have access to all of you from all over. Hello, Abdullah. Typecal from home is our virtual platform in bringing speakers and workshops to your home. And firstly, I want to introduce team members of Typecal from Home. Co-founder Lubna Saif Abbas, she's on my top left, top row. I have William Anderson, he's on my right, top row. I don't know where he is in your space, but they can wave and see where you are. And we have a couple more Typecal members, but I don't know where they're at. But if you are around, just raise your hands so they can actually find you through the screens of Zoom. And secondly, I want to thank our sponsors, American University of Kuwait and Yadawi, in supporting us with the virtual platform of Typecal from Home. And I want to say welcome and to our speaker, Sahar Afshar. We've been waiting and waiting for Sahar to accept our invitation to be part of Typecal this round. And we've been waiting for this date, 29th of March. So throughout the talk, before I give my introduction, I kindly ask you to keep your microphones, your mics on mute. And you can use any questions you may have throughout the talk. You can put it in the chat and we make sure that your questions are answered. And there will be time for Q&A. So again, we will determine what is the best method to go with the engagement that we want to have. Right, so on that note, the title of today's talk is The Cultural Narrative of Letters. And Sahar is a type designer and researcher from Iran. She's based in the UK. Her interest in typography during her years as a student at the University of Tehran led her to the University of Reading, from which she holds a MA by research in typography and graphic communication. She's currently based in London, where she works as a font developer at Dalton Maag and undertakes research as part of her PhD on the print history in Punjab region. Finally, as a member of the Center for Printing History and Culture, she helps to manage events and publications with a focus on printing of various writing systems of the world. And I'm passing on my mic onto Sahar when she is ready to take it away.
Thank you so much, Mariam. Yeah, shall I just jump right into it? Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Okay. So, is that correct? Or do you see the chat on the side? Because I have not accounted for that happening.
You're good. You're perfect.
Okay. So, yeah, good evening, morning, night to everyone from wherever you might be. Thank you all for joining today. And happy Nowruz to all of you who celebrate. And happy new spring to those of you who are in the Northern Hemisphere, and happy change of the new season to all in the Southern Hemisphere, if we have any, I don't know. But yeah, I just wanted to say thanks for joining. Every presentation only matters because of the audience, because there would be no presentation without you. So I just really appreciate you showing up and joining us for the next hour or so. And before I begin, I also just wanted to really extend my gratitude to Mariam and Lubna for inviting me to share some of my thoughts and research, and to both of them for putting together such an excellent event. I do hope that I'm able to attend the next symposium in person in beautiful Kuwait, but for now, I'm just gonna enjoy Mariam's Instagram stories and live vicariously through her. and spend the next 30 minutes or so just presenting some thoughts. And then afterwards, I would really love to hear from everyone attending. So whether you have any questions or comments or something you want to share, maybe, I don't know, a book, one advantage I feel of these online presentations is that everyone is, or most people are close to their archive. So a heavy book that maybe can't make it to a physical conference might be on hand. If you want to share something, if you have any questions, you can write them down in the chat here. So yeah, hopefully we can have more of a conversation once I've gone through the presentation. I would really like to hear from you all. So I'll jump right in. When I first met with Mariam and Lubna to discuss this presentation, we thought of themes that could benefit and interest our lovely audience. And one of the concepts that came up was this relationship between calligraphy and typography, which it seems to me is something that is very close to the heart of Typecal. And it's also a theme that's very important to me, very essential to my work ethos. So Mariam already kindly introduced me and mentioned that I work as a font developer at Dalton Maag. It's a studio in London that has been around almost as long as I have. We just recently celebrated the 30th anniversary. And yeah, my title there, a font developer, it's a very deliberate title. So the idea is that as a font developer, not only can you design a typeface, but you can do all the engineering that goes into creating a font as well. So things like handling the open type features. Let me just give you a different slide to look at too. So things like handling the open type features, the font tables, the hinting, and so forth, all the things that go into font production. Outside of Dalton Maag, I work on finishing my part-time PhD, which I'm undertaking at Birmingham City University under the supervision of Drs. Caroline Archer and Fiona Ross. I do a lot of side gigs, like editing books, writing articles, finishing up work in progress typefaces, some teaching, and doing presentations such as this one. But my main passion in all of this is Arabic type design. And that is where I apply the ethos I mentioned earlier, working at this intersection of calligraphy, type design, and print culture, which is something that isn't really unique to me. And it isn't even unique to typeface design. So, the calligraphy paintings, say, of artists like Mohammad Ihsai. So one example of which you can see here, you have no doubt been admiring while I rambled on about myself. That's a very good example of this. The typographic arrangement of letters that are heavily inspired by calligraphy but have plays on proportion are a central theme in Ihsai's work. And it's in places like this where I find inspiration that I can carry over to my own work. So that brings up two questions. How and why? How do we apply knowledge rooted in calligraphy to type design? And taking a step back, why would we do this at all? Why not let the past rest and just focus on creating something that is quote unquote modern? So those are the two questions that I want to focus on. And today I'm just going to do my best to answer those. And again, I would love to hear everyone else's thoughts on this as well. I'll begin with the why, because I'm the sort of person who appreciates and needs a good reason to do anything, big or small. So why do we need calligraphy as an anchor or a point of reference for Arabic type design? Why does it matter to at least have an understanding of Arabic calligraphy before we dive into digital design? To me, the simple answer is that type is part of a continuum, meaning this. It's what academic Robert Fraser calls the sequential trilogy of speech, script, and print. And indeed, that's how it is, right? In order to communicate thoughts, languages were invented. To document this communication across dimensions of space and time, languages were written in a variety of scripts. And later on, the invention of print made it possible to quickly and effectively and efficiently visualize information through the use of fonts. And these fonts were not, created in a vacuum. Fonts never are, but they reference the writing styles of scribes and calligraphers. As a matter of fact, type as we know it today did not exist at the start because type was made to resemble formal handwriting. Of course, over time this changed, and with the eventual development of the concept of competition between type founders, typeface design was born sometime around 1500 in Italy. But I digress. I'm going to go back to the case of Arabic. The importance of Arabic calligraphy and its influence on character shapes and stylistic preferences of various regions that use the script is unparalleled in any other script. Calligraphy is still a potent cultural and religious symbol in the contemporary Arab and Islamic world, and art historians frequently cite the importance of calligraphic writing in Islamic art and Arabic textuality. Calligraphy is still very much present in the day-to-day lives of people, whether they encounter it in architecture, like the example here, you can see so many different styles in just one image in this beautiful application in the Sheikh Lutfullah Mosque in the Shah Square in Isfahan. And, whether you're encountering it here in architecture or on banknotes and coins, in classic literature, in vernacular lettering, in stamps and other forms of ephemera, the different styles of Arabic calligraphy are all around us. And they create an image in the minds of people who interact with these letters daily, an image of how the letters should look in a given style. So calligraphy will always be the original model. And no matter how far we may deviate from this model in contemporary practice, you need to know the basics so you can then confidently stray from the model and draw letters that are still recognizable by the readers. Now, one of the great things about Arabic calligraphy is that these basics have been very clearly defined and then refined over many years. There exists what we call the essential rules of Arabic calligraphy. This chart just shows the basic rules of calligraphy initially set down by Ibn Mughal Shirazi and his brother, and later refined and completed by other master calligraphers such as Yaqut Mustasemi, Ibn Bawwab, Baba Shah Isfahani, and Sultan Ali Mashhadi. I'm sorry if my pronunciations may sound weird from how you would pronounce the names. I know that Persians pronounce things differently from Arabic speakers. So yeah, sorry for that jarring sensation that you might get. But anyway, I don't want to go into detail about this, and I don't want to, sort of put you to sleep with this boring looking chart. So let's look at this in an example. Okay, so if you're still asking why those basics matter, it's the basics that are the things that will give you important information that will inform your design practice. So let's just say that you are designing an initial he. How big or small or wide or narrow can the initial he be? And what does that depend on? Where are the thinnest parts of the stroke when writing the letter? Where are the heaviest? Where does it rest on the baseline? How does it relate to other letters? What is the distribution of straight strokes versus curved segments? What is the distribution of black and white like? And how is the counter size in comparison to the entire body of the letter? What is the pen modulation and transition like when you're writing a he? How long should the connection on the left side of this particular letter be? And how much white space should be on the right? So these are all just questions that you need to know the answers of in order to make the design decisions. And those are all answers that are already there in the basic rules of calligraphy. So we have an answer for the why, and we should invest time and effort into we have an answer on why we should invest time and effort into familiarizing ourselves with calligraphy. Mind you, becoming a master calligrapher is something that usually takes years and dedicated practice. what I'm advocating for is to just get an introductory level of familiarity with calligraphy in your arsenal of type design tools. Your work will benefit from it. But anyway, let's say you do that. Let's say you've signed up for some classes, you've picked up a reed pen, and you've started practicing, and you've gotten to a level of familiarity that you feel comfortable with. Now comes the next question. How? How do we apply our learnings from calligraphy to type design, and what are some very practical ways that we can do this? The first is that you will begin to gain an understanding of all the various Arabic calligraphic styles when you start researching Arabic calligraphy. And this in itself is a massive treasure trove of knowledge. In this chart alone, you can see 12 different styles of Arabic calligraphy, and already you can see how much letter forms can vary according to each style. So just focusing on 2 styles that happen to be side by side in this chart, the Nasalir and the Ruka, you can already see major variations in the proportions, even though the Aleph is 3 dots high in both styles. I say 3 dots high because that's how we measure the length of things in Arabic calligraphy, right? You use whatever pen you're writing with, the rhombic sort of diamond-shaped dot that you create with that particular pen dictates the length of the Aleph, and following from that, the proportions of the rest of the characters as well. So in these 2 particular styles, on the very top row, first row, you see the Aleph, which is 3 dots long, but then you can see that moving on from there, and I mean, even in the Aleph itself, you can see how different the 2 styles are. So the height of the 2 Alephs being the same, almost everything else is different. Where Ruka is fast, clipped, generally has smaller counters and has more straight segments than curves, Nas Salir is slower, it's deliberate, it has a preference for curved strokes, and has a lot more contrast. So each of these styles, they're beautiful in their own right, but they create 2 very different moods and 2 very different colors and textures on the page. So do you want a dynamic typeface that gives a sense of speed? Then maybe Ruka is the way to go. Or maybe you want to match, let's say, a handwritten Latin typeface with an Arabic companion. And in that case, Ruka can also be a good match because it had the same intention. Ruka was created in the Ottoman offices by scribes who wanted a very legible and quick style. And in that sense, conceptually, the 2 are the same. They were used in the same way. So again, having this sort of information about the history of it can help you draw parallels in styles that were similarly used and can be used in combination. Or maybe you want something that is softer, slower, and then you decide on using Nas Salir instead, or as in this example, Shikasta Nas Salir or cursive Nas Salir, with its sweeping strokes, with the outstrokes, as you can see, are very sort of elaborate, as in the image. Or say, for example, going back to our chart, that you're working on a particular letter and you need a solution to make that letter look distinct and different and to set it apart design-wise, or just to resolve outlines that aren't quite working when you're designing the letter mim. You can look into the shaping of it across different styles. It's the line that's highlighted in purple here, and you can see that there are so many different design solutions for just a single letter. And for example, that's one of the things that I applied when I was designing Athelas Arabic. The meme has a very different look from that sort of common approach, which you can see on the line below, which is also very valid. But just to say that there are so many design solutions that are sometimes unexplored because there are shapes that are much more familiar. But the thing is, this meme is still recognizable as a meme. And when you're reading it in text, through context and through the general shapes and proportions, you will not read it as anything else, and you will not recognize it as a different letter. So these, maybe looking at all of these solutions can, help you with your design and making it set itself apart from the usual shaping of letters that you see in different Arabic typefaces. So to me, it's a bit of a lost opportunity every time we don't spend a bit of time exploring, trying to find new and creative solutions and shapes. I mean, look at all the different ways that you can design an ain. There's so much variation you can apply to each of those two bowed strokes, the bowls, let's say. And it's a shame to just always settle for the highly familiar shapes of Nasali. Sorry, I just wanted to say, just going back here for a second, this is especially true if you're working on a display typeface. There's so much to be borrowed from styles like Ruka, Diwani, Tali, Qobar, and Ejaze. There's a lot of room for exploration in letter shapes. Now, returning to what I mentioned earlier about the essential rules of Arabic calligraphy, one of the other clearly defined aspects is the angle of the pen nib when writing in a given style. So many people assume that Arabic calligraphy is just written with a pen nib cut at a 45 angle degree. That is not necessarily true. It can be true if you are writing a muhaqqaq or rayhan, say, but you can have many in-between angles between this aforementioned 45 and straight up horizontal nib, which would be used for many Kufi styles. And of course, this is just to illustrate the point that I'm making, but there are other styles in there as well. So, and each of those styles will have its own pen nib angle. So I think this is in itself just another avenue for exploration. What can happen to a given design if I have a different angle and then apply that consistently across the entire design? There's so much room to stray away from that strictly 45-degree pen nib. And just to illustrate this point a bit more, I wanted to show 3 lam alif combinations from 3 different typefaces I personally worked on. The reason I chose to show these 3 is that while they look so different on the surface, each is on some level rooted in calligraphic or handwritten traditions. So the example on the far left for Airbnb Arabic, it's based on the simplified Naskh model, right? Which is the most legible and accessible of all the calligraphic writing styles. And that is said to be that way because there's an absolutely equal balance between straight segments and curved segments. And it was also the best style of writing that was suited for reproduction and print with, movable type print technology, let's say, because of the relatively flat baseline, as opposed to some styles that have very highly cascading baselines, let's say. So that's the example on the left. And then, the fact that it was so legible made it suitable for a client who prioritizes accessibility and ease of character recognition. The lam alif in the middle is from Arta, a typeface which is highly calligraphic. It's a design that's inspired by the Thuluth and Rayhan styles. I stayed quite close to the calligraphic model on this typeface, but I did a little bit of play on the proportions because when something is extra, I like to push that dramatic sort of look of it. So I sort of emphasized that a bit, and I pushed that sort of dramatic flair of it a little bit. And then finally on the right side, there's a lam alif from a work in progress typeface that I have right now called Afra. And it's based on vernacular lettering, particularly of the flavor that you find in Egypt. But what I did with that was that I combined it a bit with handwritten conventions. So in my own handwriting, I often do this thing where I loop the lam alif, so I connect the two, And I decided, to do the same. I carried it over, this feature, to a very displayish typeface. So I always do this thing of holding close the calligraphic past in my work, whether it's easy to see, as in the example in the middle, or if I've strayed far from it, as in the example on the right, the underlying basics are still there. And, I always benefit from going back to the original source, which is the sort of calligraphic practice and calligraphic examples. And just to sort of say, the Arabic script, it's used all the way from Morocco to China. That's a massive, vast region, right? There are, it's so many countries and cultures and histories with different music, literature, architecture, design, and there is so much room for exploration there. All of these can be influential and inform our design. Just look at this beautiful example of scenic calligraphy from an Uyghur mosque in China. These flowing, ribbony, organic strokes, it's such a fascinating avenue of Arabic letter form shapes. And I think it can be, the starting point for a number of interesting design projects. And, you give this like tip of the thread, let's say, to any single person, and they will go in their own and use their own sort of background and their own aesthetics, and you can achieve so many different results just from the same starting point. So yeah, I just think there's a lot of room to explore in our past before we even think about, what can I do that's new and different? There's already so much that is still unexplored. So one last point that I want to make before wrapping up this presentation is how calligraphy can also inform technology, which is, that's just the extreme of it, right? Something that is so traditional and just goes back hundreds of years, now informing new technologies that are being developed. I don't want to go into this in too much detail. For anyone who's interested, there's an hour-long presentation somewhere on YouTube where my partner on this project and in life, Jose Sole, and I talked about this in Typo Labs Berlin, I think in 2018. But anyway, to explain briefly, when variable fonts became a reality in 2017 with the joint efforts of Microsoft, Google, Facebook, and Adobe, we were really keen for it not yet again to be another technology that is entirely Latin focused, which all other writing systems would just adapt to and make use of in some capacity. I thought back then, what if this technology could actually be used to resolve issues in previously existing technologies, like the issue of Kashidas with various lengths? So for anyone who doesn't know, Kashidas are when certain letters themselves, or sometimes the connections between specific letter pairs, are elongated, such as the ones marked here in this image in blue. So the ability to add these elongations does currently exist. However, you're usually at best confined to, let's say, 3 lengths. And, even with that, you may or may not be able to resolve your design issue or your Kashida needs. There are many different reasons why you need a Kashida, and sometimes it's to fill a space, sometimes it's for aesthetics, sometimes it's for legibility. So even in this beautiful typeface you can see here, which is, it's called Mirza, it's by Amir Mehdi Moslehi. It comes as close to being perfect as I've seen with the currently available technology, and applying Kashidas organically and nicely with these smooth curves. However, what we were envisioning was something like this. We wanted this elongation or shortening of the Kashida to be manually adjustable by users. I've shown this slide far too many times now in different presentations, but what I'm always surprised by is how many people look at it, especially readers of the Arabic script, and say, oh, of course, that makes sense. Does it work? So this is just to show that it can work. This is the demo we showed at Typo Labs. You can see that with the adjustment of the screen size, the elongations are changing to fit the available space while sort of maintaining a curve. And you can also see that it is manually adjustable. So you can select letters and you can make that particular group of letters connection between two letters, let's say longer or shorter. This is, it's available online to test as well. But of course, this technology being implemented depends on many people investing a lot of time and money into seeing it through. So for now, we're waiting to see how things go. I'm sorry if I threw around quite a few unfamiliar terms just now, variable fonts or axes or things like that. But of course, if Google doesn't do the trick, I'm happy to explain this further for anyone who wants to talk about it more. Feel free to email me about it. I'm not the fastest to respond, but I eventually do respond. I wanted to leave you with just a few resources that you can use today to get yourself started if you are so inclined to look further into calligraphy. Maybe this would be a good screenshot moment. There are, of course, many fantastic books that you can buy to learn more about Arabic calligraphy. Off the top of my head, Sheila Blair's book titled Arabic Calligraphy. I see Mariam nodding, she knows, Rabna knows, yeah. It's a fantastic one to start. These are, as we find ourselves in crazy COVID lockdown times and we are not able to access physical archives, these are a few really good stand-in online archives that are free. I have just alone on its own put down archive.org because there's so many resources on there. Even if you just start like searching for specific styles, a lot of resources pop up there. So yeah, I leave you with these and I will hand the mic back to Mariam, and hopefully we can now hear from some people in the audience. I'm happy to answer any questions, or if anyone has any comments. I don't know if we have type designers or graphic designers who are, very type adjacent in their work and in the audience. If they similarly use calligraphy in their practice, I would love to hear how they apply that as well. So just wanted to say shukran, thank you for being here and for giving me your time. Yeah, I would love to hear from everyone else now. I'll stop talking. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahar.